Okay, excellent. So it is, we are convening a meeting of the Vermont Community Broadband Board. It is April 21st, and we are convening at 12:01. First item on the agenda is to do roll call. We have present thus far for board members, Brian, Sarah, Dan. We're expecting Laura, but she's not on yet. Christine, will you do staff roll call?
Yes, we have Ginny Reboyne, Rob Fish, J.B. Ledoux, Heron Herzog, Alexi Montserrat, Lucy Fortier, U.J. Lee, Tony Clitheroe, and Jose Agallo. Excellent.
Welcome, everybody. First on our agenda for items to take action on is approval of the minutes. So I'll put a motion on the floor to approve the minutes provided in our packet. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Thank you, Sarah. Is there any discussion of the agenda? Any changes to the agenda? And I see Laura just joined us. It's 12:02. Hello, Laura. Any changes to the agenda?
Nope.
Okay, hearing and seeing none. All those in favor of approving the agenda as provided, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? The ayes carry 5-0. Next on our agenda is approval of our March 17th meeting minutes. I'll put a motion on the floor to approve the minutes in our packet. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Okay, I think Laura was there first, so we're gonna give that to Laura. Any discussion on the meeting minutes from March 17th? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of the minutes provided in our packet, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes carry 5-0. Then that brings us to item 3 on our agenda, which is public comment. And Christine, I'll turn that over to you to run.
Yes, feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to make a statement. We'll give you up to 3 minutes and we'll pick you in the order that you raise your hand. So would anybody like to make a public comment at this point? Okay, I do not see any hands being raised.
Okay, so we can always come back. We have another public comment opportunity later in the agenda. So if anybody has anything that they would like to say toward the end, we can you can take that up at that point. That brings us to item 4 on our agenda, which is the BEAD update. Christine, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. This is, you know, a little bit different than the BEAD, the board's role in the BEAD process. We'll be going through some detail in there on the history of BEAD and what we're doing, but this is important because there are changes that are being planned at the federal level, and Alexi will kind of go over where we are and what some of those possible changes might be. Go ahead, Alexi.
Yeah, so as Christine mentioned, this is just a brief note on the range of items that we briefed on last meeting or meeting before in regard to some of the things that we know are being talked about at the federal level. Really the update is there is not a whole lot of an update. We understand that and have been told by our program officer that new guidance will be issued on May 16th. But there is not really much preview of what that might entail, the depth of the changes, or what it will imply for our program. I will be briefing pretty extensively on that at 1 o'clock as far as where we are. But so we are awaiting word and trying to ferret out what we can, but right now it's a lot of rumors and speculation, and I don't know that it's super helpful to go into detail on those, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Sorry, go ahead. I was on mute. Floor is yours.
Yeah, just in terms of timing, have we made a decision about we won't be where we will not be making any announcements about our process prior to, it's more of a statement, I guess, than guidance coming from NTIA. Is that right? Do you anticipate making announcements about our process before we get guidance from NTIA?
Yeah, I
Just a
mean,
question.
we can, and again, some of this will come up at one. The issue just right at the moment, as far as, kind of some numbers on who participate, or not really who, but how many and coverage and things like that. We're still sifting a lot of that information. So as I'll preview, but the full proposal portal closed Wednesday night at midnight. And so we received a lot of applications, obviously. So we're going through those and pulling out cost estimates and making sure that there is coverage and things like that. But it's pretty preliminary right now, just because we've only had a couple days with it, and there is a lot of it. So we will be updating you on that as we can.
Great.
Okay,
Thanks.
Sarah, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Lexi. Because this is coming out May 15th, the update, well, we think it's coming out May 15th. Our meeting would be on the 12th. Our normal meeting would be on the 12th. Is there any reason to push our meeting off to the 19th, 1 week later, so we'll have actually some information about the BEAD program?
Thank you, Sarah. I'm glad you brought that up, because we've been a little bit of debate on staff on that one. So from our perspective, it may make sense, because some of these, there's the one extreme of the rumor could have some dramatic impact to our program, and we would want the board to meet as soon as possible. So it could require a special meeting. But again, we're working off of rumors, so we're not sure what to say, but that would be a board decision.
Yeah, I have no objection to moving the meeting date. Unfortunately, though, I can't do the 19th. But Sarah, I think it's a good idea that we plan to move the meeting date for a couple reasons. One being this new information that's going to come out, and two is that the April meeting is a week later than normal. So we may not have a lot of information to deal with anyway in 3 weeks. So I'm happy to move sometime in the week of sometime between the 20th and the 23rd.
Just a brief input. So the 16th is the day that it's expected, which is a Friday, which means we may or may not have a whole lot of time to have even kind of reviewed and let alone digest. And if past this prologue, there are often many questions that result from guidance. So maybe a couple of days just to be able to provide a sensible readout of what we think we're looking at.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion, Alexi.
That sounds like moving up the June meeting.
That's true, because we would be pushing up against the June meeting. Could folks do June 2nd?
Yes.
All right, we've got 3 that are yes. Okay, Brian, could you do June 2nd?
I believe so, yes.
All right, Laura, you were a thumbs up?
Yes.
All right, let's make it June 2nd. I can make that happen too. And that gives staff plenty of time to review the material.
Okay.
Yeah, we can provide updates in the weekly as well as we get things.
Okay. All right, let's make that an action item.
That was all for me.
Okay. Is there any other information to share on item 4, which is the BEAD update? All right, let's now move on to item 5, which is the low income long and underground drop program proposal.
Yeah, this proposal, the board already approved a plan and gave us the authority to move ahead with a $2.5 million plan, but we have more ARPA funds, and we want to get those funds committed as soon as possible. So we're going to recommend increasing the amount to $6 million, but at the same time, the board asked us to come back and show what the program was. You gave us the authority to carry out the program, but you wanted us to come back and inform you. So consider this, the informing as well as a request to increase. So we'll ask for at the end, if you approve of this, to approve of the program as presented. So I'll turn it over to Rob Fish, who's been putting this program together. Go ahead, Rob.
Okay.
Thank you, Christine, and good afternoon, everybody. I have a very brief slideshow. I think it's 6 slides to go through what we've done with the program. First, just as a little bit of background, this was approved by the board in September of last year. Staff and in conjunction with some outreach thought it was wise to postpone till after the BEAD applications were in. So now we are looking at a launch in the next few months. The second thing I want to draw your attention to is we did change the name. After discussions internal and with stakeholders, we realized that it's low income just wasn't capturing it, even though it's included. We want to be focusing on what our goal is, which is to make these connections affordable to all Vermonters, and we're doing it in several different ways. We also came across people who just didn't like to identify as low income, so that's why we're calling it the Affordable Drop Program now. This is one of our first big steps with our affordability policy that was adopted by the board. I put a few quotes from the policy on the screen. That'll just show the connection here. And I'll just go into the policy. So here's just a quick overview of it. It's going to be a single round. Eligible applicants are the CUDs and small telecoms with previously approved universal service and business plans. So Sarah, do you have a question?
Thank you, Rob. I just wanted to know, what are small telecoms?
So it was small telecoms were defined in Act 71. So it's actually, Laura, I may ask you, small telecoms, I'm trying to remember exactly, it's under 5 counties. I want to make sure I get this right, and Laura or Tony would certainly know the exact legal.
Yeah, I guess my recommendation would be to open up the law, which I'm happy to do.
Oh, well, I can look, Laura. I have a copy right here. I'll look.
Okay.
When you said
Sorry.
small telecom, I suddenly realized I wasn't sure what that was. So I'll look at the act.
I'll sum it
It's
up though.
actually small communications carriers, Sarah, maybe that makes it clearer. It's just small communications carriers. So these are like little local carriers.
Right. So what this means though, by having these 3 criteria, is the program is really open to anybody who has received a construction grant from the VCBB. So that narrows the universe of applicants. The program will prioritize low income, and we're defining low income first by manufactured home communities. This is something that other state agency, ACCD, does with their manufactured home or mobile home revitalization program or repair program. By default, they have determined that manufactured home communities are considered lower income. Vermonters who received aid from other programs, eligible provider identified and verified. We want to back up 1 second. One big piece of advice we had both from our administrative staff and from potential applicants was to not be too prescriptive here. That it's come to a point where our applicants have matured enough where we want them to tell us how they are doing it. This allows for a lot more flexibility. This allows for just creativity and coming up with new models that'll inform our next actions when it comes to affordability. So all the applicants are going to be asked to explain how they're going to prioritize. These addresses are going to have to be funded first, as well as their outreach plan of how they are going to find out where these people live in their communities. And I'll get to that a little bit later.
Rob, just to interrupt, we did say in the plan, they would show, I spent a little time talking about who received aid from other programs, because you can give a couple of examples on that, because it kind of follows the model of the ACP. I believe, but go ahead, Rob.
Sure, it very much follows the model of the ACP with ACP, Affordable Connectivity Program, rest in peace, unfortunately, that it's going to, if you're getting SNAP benefits, for instance, if you're getting heating aid, if you're on Lifeline, those types of programs that we felt it was easier. And we're encouraging the potential applicants to reach out to community partners in their area, both to build an outreach plan, to make that connection, and to identify who can benefit from it. Because these addresses, the money is going to have to be set aside first to cover these addresses. And we know it's going to be an iterative process as the program goes, where more people are going to be identified, but lower income is first. We also want to mention that we're standardizing things with the grant application. It's only using ARPA capital projects funds. Originally, we were going to move the connectivity initiative funding into this as well. We are now going to save that since it doesn't have a deadline. And it gives us another chance to once again tackle lower income people where affordability is an issue with getting connected to the network. These are going to be fixed cost awards, so we're going to be benchmarks rather than receipts to ease the burden for everybody. We also are going to be setting an earlier deadline to make sure we have enough time for all of the reporting that's necessary for the ARPA funds and to ensure all the projects are done. The other important part of this is, like, yes, we are asking for more money, but we're designing the program with a lot of flexibility and a lot of room for negotiation. There are a lot of competing priorities at the moment and a lot of potential changes that could happen over the next few months. So we want to make sure the money is obligated to this program, but we have flexibility to make changes if the winds change, let's say. So the program goals, I'm not going to go through these. This was taken directly from the resolution that was passed. Just to highlight though, this is lower income, but it's also affordability. So there are over 1,000 addresses that have been identified around the state from the CUDs. We expect that there's more where people have wanted to sign up to become customers, but the barrier was the drop, that it was underground or it was long. So this would also take care of those addresses and turn those addresses into paying customers, which helps the CUD's business plans and spreads connectivity around the state. Oh, the other thing I want to also point out here is that we keep mentioning flexibility and creativity. A lot of the CUDs right now are working on their own affordability plans that could mesh really well with this program. So we want to hear about the models that they present. We want to hear if they're doing anything of, like, perhaps it's with a manufactured home community where they're doing what we're calling a campus solution, where it's fiber to the road, but then it's provided by another technology throughout the entire manufactured home community at a lower rate. We want to be open to these experiments as long as they achieve the threshold of 100 over 100 that's required in Act 71. Also could include different innovative price structures. So we don't want to close the door on the creativity that exists out there with all of our community leaders that are so concerned about affordability. So once again, the prioritized projects, this is taken from the board resolution, said manufactured home communities, pre-signed up customers, and low-income Vermonters. So what we're asking for from applicants, we want the applicant to explain how they're going to determine the actual level of service in, for instance, a manufactured home community. Because of the way some of the data is reported both to the PSD and potentially to the PSD and potentially to the FCC, there very well may be locations in a manufactured home community that do not have access to service, even though it says. We want to confirm that. So we're going to be asking applicants to, how do you plan on doing that? How do you plan on checking the data a little bit to make sure nobody is missed? How are you going to identify, verify, and prioritize low income? How are you going to use these resources efficiently? We also want them to reconfirm once again that they're going to provide the data that's required by the affordability policy. We're going to have that due in December of 2025 for data as of June of this year. So once again, this is connected into implementing the affordability policy the board passed. We want the applicants to provide the total numbers, the estimated cost of service to cover to cover these people, and then just how they're going to initially judge what's their initial estimate going to be of who is lower income? How are they coming up with that figure? And then how are they calculating how much it's going to cost to get service to them? So once again, it's less prescriptive, more of tell us how you are going to do this. You have the ability to do it. You have the knowledge. You have the engineering. Go for it. How we're going to be scoring them is going to have to do with, well, is it a lower income project? And then reviewing what I just went over in terms of their innovation, their impact, their methodology, and then there's the factor of VCBB discretion. So that's the presentation. I'm going to stop sharing the screen right now, and if there's any questions, I'll gladly tackle some of the questions.
Hey, Rob, this is Patty. A couple of quick questions. So the applicant is not necessarily the homeowner. It's actually, is it the CUD or the homeowner?
It is the CUD. The CUD
Okay.
or the small telecom, whatever yeah.
Gotcha. And then, so it's not the homeowner that needs to be aware. So it's not the homeowner applying. I'm just trying to like connect the dots of the CUD may not know that information that a person, a residence, a household is low income. So how do we make those, how do we jump over those barriers of knowledge to make sure that the homeowner becomes aware that there's funds available, or the CUD becomes aware of funds available for on behalf of that homeowner?
The VCBB will do an additional outreach about the program, and we would expect any applicant to also do that type of outreach and to network with various social service agencies to do even just, we want to hear what they come up with in terms of the best practice for outreach. We will certainly provide advice and share what others are doing, but it's up to them to do it. Some of the CUDs have access to systems that have identified where there are lower income people along their network. Other people are gonna, when they know this is available and this is their chance to get connected, are gonna self-identify as well. We are gonna need to, before we approve funding, we are gonna need to see that they have come up with an outreach plan and they are in the process of implementing it, that they're working with partners, and that they're doing their due diligence to make this work.
Okay, because I think the success of the program really depends on the CUD being communicative to potential homeowners that might say, oh, I would really like the service. And then they are like, oh, I can't afford it. The CUD is going to have to peel the onion back to see, does this person qualify? So I mean, that's a challenge put out to the CUDs as to how are they going to get the information out there to potential low income entities or residents that would use these funds, because that's really going to be the success of the program, is that communication effort.
Exactly.
Okay. So I had Dan, you have your hand up.
Just a comment, because I was reading the weekly notes, and the manufactured home communities are really, I think, where the lower income challenges are. Rob, you said when cost or distance was a driver, because that's the hurdle for gaining access. I'm not sure if that was intentional, but I guess mine is a comment. There are a lot of very wealthy people with extremely long driveways that just don't want to spend that money to get in there, and will be willing to hold out. And I would be disappointed if in these areas we were subsidizing $10 million homes, and we're going to put fiber in their 3,000 foot driveway. That could do 100 other homes that really need it, that are truly low income. So I'm sensitive to that. Generally speaking, underground services are a luxury. So it's a comment, but I hope that's being scrutinized carefully.
No, certainly. Thank you, Dan. That's why one of our things that we're going to be judging proposals on is efficient use of resources. So that might be something that would not be an efficient use of resources.
Okay, good point, Dan. Thank you for bringing that up. So Rob, the 6 million, help me with so the 6 million is going to go into this program, and once we say thumbs up, we the board give the nod that this is what the program is and the 6 million is dedicated to that. Are those funds encumbered at that point? So they're essentially
Yes.
promised to this program and considered spent.
They are promised to the program, so they are obligated to the program. If the
Okay.
board made another decision down the road because of changing circumstances, that's the board's discretion. But at that point, they will be obligated
Okay.
by the board. They will not be in a grant agreement until they are in a grant agreement. So this is where we're a little bit different than other parts of state government, but the board will have
Okay.
spoken.
Okay. And the board will approve the grants. Correct?
Yes, we will come
Okay.
forth with a proposal after we review what's come in for an amount.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that when you say approve the grants, it wasn't our intent to come in with every grant for approval, was it, Rob?
It wasn't, it was our intent to come up with a slate of approvals
Yeah.
for it, that the staff would be doing the due diligence, how we normally work it. Yes, we wouldn't be going through an entire meeting for every single proposal. We would bring you what our analysis is and ask for a sign off.
I think that's appropriate. I think the board does need to bless that based on the Act 71 requirements.
Yes.
Christine, I'm assuming you're going to need a motion and a vote on the program details as presented.
Yeah, Tony has her hand up though. I think she
Oh, I didn't see that. Tony?
Sorry, I just wanted to say the funds will not be obligated until the grant agreements are signed.
Right, they won't be obligated, but the 6 million will be dedicated to the program.
Yes, they will be
Right.
dedicated to the program, but that there's a
Right.
Well,
specific
let Tony answer that
definition for
question, Rob.
obligation.
That's
true.
a
Sorry.
question for Tony.
That's all right.
Well, they would be allocated.
Tony, could you
but not-
clarify?
Yeah, the allocation versus obligation. And obligation, I think, was your question, Patty, and that is the operative term.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Let me ask that differently. Let me ask that a little differently then. So if we've decided here's the program, and assuming we approve this in a second here, and that 6 million is pledged, promised to the program, is there any opportunity that it could be taken away by other entities for some reason?
Yes, these funds are with us, but as you're probably aware, there are some needs elsewhere in the state. So until the funds are obligated, it's unlikely, but.
Right.
we do
Okay.
need
These
to
are
be
actually
obligated.
capital project funds. So there's a very limited use that they can be. There's only
Okay.
certain, it's basically it has to be used for infrastructure, and it would be quite the process. It's not just a simple budget process to take these
Okay.
away from us. But anything and everything could possibly be at risk depending on what happens in Washington.
Yeah, but I think that's what I wanted to clarify. I think it's an understanding that it would be, we're making it more difficult, although it doesn't totally eliminate
Okay.
the risk.
What would be, do we have a timeline relative to when we'd be asking for grant requests and then
So-
ultimate approval?
So we are, the CUDs and eligible applicants have urged us to get this program out there as soon as possible because of the time frame of the construction season. We agree with that, and we're going to do what we can, but we are still negotiating with the administrative side to make sure that we can get everything set up in Amplifund and all of that. The one thing we will be doing to ensure we get the entire construction season, this one and next one, is we will be pre-award expenses are allowable under what we're designing. So we want people to get started.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a design component of this, but what's the target date to start the program, Rob?
The target date to start the program would be to have applications due. I would like to have them due by the end of June. As I said, it may be a little bit ambitious, but we're moving ahead. We have a draft RFP that we're working on that we're going to integrate any of the feedback we have from the board today. Treasury needs to sign off on the framework of the program. We don't see any reason why that wouldn't be an issue. This aligns perfectly with what they want us to do. And then I think at that point we can issue the RFP, but it has to be set up on the Amplifund before the applications themselves can be accepted. And there's competing priorities with that. So we will see, but we are going to be moving as quick as possible while also respecting there's competing priorities.
And we'll keep the board informed on that timeline with that
Yeah.
with those target dates.
Okay, that's really helpful. I appreciate that extra feedback. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the affordable drop program as presented by staff in our packet. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Dan. Any discussion? Comments? All right, let's be ready if we are ready for the question. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? The ayes carry 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, excellent. All right, so that brings us to item 6 on the agenda, which is VCBB board roles in the BEAD process.
Yep, thank you.
Christine,
And
I'll get you.
Alexi and Tony have worked closely together on this presentation, so take it away. Alexi, go ahead.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so we, in part in responding to the board's request for clarity around its role when it comes to the BEAD process, but also just to kind of really get everybody refreshed and then up to speed on where we are in the program. We wanted to give some background on the various pieces of what we've been working on. So here's the sort of general, since we put out the RFA last fall, what we've been working on. We, of course, did the RFA and put that out and then ran a pre-proposal process, and I'm going to explain each piece of these as we go. We are currently at the full proposal and subgrantee selection stage. And so as I mentioned, the proposal portal closed April 16th at midnight. And so we are officially into the process of reviewing those applications. I'll talk in more detail about what that entails. Once that piece of things is complete and we've selected provisional awardees, we would then be bringing that information to the VCBB board, and Tony will provide more clarity on the precise nature of that role. But the bottom line is that we would be ensuring that you all understand, are comfortable with, and believe that we correctly followed our process for managing the subgrantee selection. And then the final stage is to have a meeting with NTIA where we present essentially the same set of information. They then bless that as able to move forward, and then we move into the stage of actually designing the grant agreements and getting the money moving. And so, as you'll recall, I think we ran prior to the full proposal stage was a pre-proposal stage. We provided some information on the outcomes of that, I believe. But that ran from December 4th to January 9th. And the goal there was to, a couple things. One, help us know who was going to apply. So we made it a mandatory step in the process that if you wanted to file a full proposal for BEAD funds, then you needed to tell us that at the pre-proposal stage. We also then asked folks if they wanted any changes to any of the initial project areas that we had designed, of which there were 35. And then we took that information and then evaluated that and designed the final project areas, which are what we solicited bids on. Just again, terminology is challenging with BEAD. There's a lot of it. So I wanted, before we get into what the pre-proposal showed, just remind folks that when we talk about a priority broadband project, what we mean by that is 100% fiber to the home. And then, so distinguished from that are what are called other last mile. There's a couple different types of those, what are called reliable technologies, which means a fiber cable hybrid, for example, licensed fixed wireless, DSL, cable. And then at present, there are called alternative technologies, and in that category, we have satellite and unlicensed fixed wireless. That DSL there is a misprint. So just to, as we're talking through this, just have that in mind. So we had 9 entities participate in the pre-proposal process. We had a total request of 67 modifications that can be anything from a single address to a whole bunch of addresses that people wanted us to either shift around, remove, or otherwise. We did remove some initial project areas and group them into either other ones or created new ones. The upshot was that 18 of our project areas had a priority pre-proposal, i.e. Fiber. And the statistic there was that it was 95% of the eligible addresses would be covered by fiber. 5 project areas had at least one reliable other last mile, so in that category of cable or licensed fixed wireless or other. And then we did have 4 that received only an alternative technology, meaning low Earth orbit satellite or unlicensed fixed wireless. So at the end of all that, having looked at what everybody requested and making sure that the way that we designed everything, as always, meets our goals of maximizing fiber for the best value, we ended up with 32 final project areas, and that's what everybody submitted their pre-proposals for. There are some cases I mentioned that pre-proposal is a requirement in order to submit a full proposal. There are a couple of ways that we wanted to make sure that we didn't miss any addresses. And so, for example, if an area didn't receive a priority pre-proposal, someone new could come in who hadn't filed a pre-proposal and could participate. If we didn't have a bid that meets gating requirements, and I'll explain gating requirements in a minute. And there is a non-priority proposal for something that didn't receive any pre-proposals. And again, the failure of the gating requirement or any of the new project areas. So we did create, I want to say, 6 or so new project areas. So in theory, someone could have participated at that stage. So we have just finished the full proposal stage, and we are currently reviewing the applications. That process is going to involve a few steps. The first is gating and technical requirements. So gating encompassing ensuring that the entity that applied meets the financial capability criteria, managerial capability, and has a proven track record, essentially affirming that the business plan is viable. All of these elements that are sort of similar in a way to how we ran that process through the ARPA grants. It's a similar sort of level of scrutiny. And then also the technical requirements. So similarly, that is all of the examining the actual mapping and the addresses and making sure that all of those pieces are in line. Our colleagues from RSM are conducting the gating piece, and CTC is doing the technical requirements. Once a proposal clears all that, then we move on to scoring it. We have a number of colleagues from our PSD team that are helping us with that, along with a couple of us from VCBB as well as RSM, who will be doing that scoring piece of things. Per the rules of the NOFO, we do not have to score an application if it's the only one in its project area. We think this probably will be the case for some, so the plan is to advance those as quickly as we can so that we're doing as much as possible at any given moment. And then that final stage being looking at who has passed their gating, who has the best proposal, if we have to score it. We identify that person as a prospective winner. That doesn't come with any kind of public announcement or anything. It's an internal line that they have to get through in order for us to begin the negotiation process. We do hope that all of this happens in a single round. It will depend on coverage of the applications and whether or not during negotiation we end up removing any addresses or locations that we then need to put through in a second round. And so we will keep you updated on how that's going, but the hope is that we get it done in one go. This, I think, hopefully you'll recall from the discussion around some of the changes that could be coming, but the way that we are prioritizing a proposal per our initial proposal volume 2, as well as the RFA. Again, if we only have one proposal, that's the presumptive winner and we can move on. If it's more than one, then we score them. And the first layer of scoring that we will do are on priority proposals, i.e. fiber to the home, if there are competing proposals there. And then we would move to other last mile if there are no priority proposals. But as far as who we're going to engage with first in the negotiation process, we're always going to look to the fiber in the event that we have that available. You've seen the scoring rubric a number of times, just a brief refresher. So again, the vast majority of this was predetermined as defined in the NOFO as far as the elements of scoring, and then in some instances, the minimum beat outlay had to be the largest category, for example. So there were other requirements that have resulted in the point assignments that you see here. And then, within each of these, we have operationalized, how the specific scoring is going to work. Obviously here, the beat outlay is the most important piece, followed closely by affordability and then fair labor. Those are the so-called primary scoring criteria. There's also a set of secondary, meaning they have lower point assignments. Those are different if you're a priority or another last mile. So the slash here means that, for example, community input engagement for a priority project, there's a total of 12 points available to you, but for another last mile, it's 5. Similarly, local coordination, 11 points priority, 5 points other last mile. So the real art and science, once we get into the negotiation stage, and I think we've talked some about the extremely high cost per location threshold, which is essentially set by us once we have the whole picture of all of the different applications that we have. It becomes a balancing act of making sure that we have enough funds to get all of the unserved addresses in the state that are eligible under BEAD, and then as many of the underserved as we can, while also making sure that we're deploying the technology in a place that makes sense. And so one of the things that we built into our proposal volume 2 is the ability to, once we get looking at what all the numbers are, we can go out and then seek different technologies. So if we can't get all fiber bid below, a reasonable cost, what we determine is the high cost, then we can go out and look at different technologies to try to fill that gap. So the Vermont BEAD program anticipates that there will be multiple forms of technology involved. So I'm going to pause there because Tony picks up from here as we get into the rest of the program here. But I just want to, or excuse me, how the board role fits in. But I just want to pause and see if there are any questions there, or you can wait till the end.
I see Sarah's hand up. Sarah, go ahead.
Yes, thanks so much for the presentation. So for those areas, let's say you receive no proposals for, what happens next?
I don't know if you can hear me, but I seem to have poor network quality, which is always an ironic thing to happen in the middle of a VCDB meeting. I'm not sure if I can hear yet or if you can hear me.
Yep.
But I didn't.
We can hear you.
Question,
Yep. You're good.
So I need Sarah, your question again. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So for those areas you may not have received a proposal for, what happens next?
Yeah, so that's where those rules around both who can then submit an application as well as just our own latitude under the NOFO and our volume 2, we will essentially be going out and either talking to providers who are already in the area and seeing if there's a way that we can get those addresses covered, or we might put them out to bid in a second round, depending on what makes the most sense as far as where those addresses are and what technology might make the most sense.
Okay, thank you.
So, I mean, and just to reiterate that it is a requirement for our final proposal that we have a solution for every BEAD eligible address. So we can't leave anything behind. Okay, if that's that, then Tony, do you want to take
Yes,
it away?
yes. Can you keep your
Yep,
slides?
I can run the
Thank
slides.
you. Great. So now to the fun stuff for the board. I thought this might be helpful just to kind of describe the differences between what you're used to with the ARPA grants and what you will be doing when it comes up into the BEAD selection, which is just around the corner. And essentially, you're moving from a non-competitive program where we were looking more substantively at each application and how many addresses and the business plans, et cetera, to reviewing what is in effect an open public bidding, competitive bidding process. So the board's role is going to shift really from a more substantive review of the actual application to a procedural review of what staff has done in this process, which Alexi has just gone through with the gating and the scoring rubric. All of those, it's a very prescribed process. The next slide. So we don't have, unfortunately, we don't have any like form templates to show you just yet, but hopefully, certainly by the next meeting we will. But what staff is going to do during the review and the scoring process is they're going to be using documents that reflect how they scored each applicant and why. And those documents will be made available for the board's review. In addition, staff is going to be preparing a memorandum to the board that makes a recommendation of award based on based on that substantive review that will be done by staff. Yeah, so as noted, the 75%, the primary points deal with the amount of the BEAD subaward, affordability, and fair labor standards issues. That's the bulk of the point system. And then the secondary criteria take up the last 25%. Next slide. So there's the memo that the board's going to be provided with. Primarily the board is going to be reviewing that documentation and the memorandum and looking for, indicia of staff having properly performed their role and raising any questions that the board may have. As I think Alexi referred to, the NTIA process involves a committee review at the NTIA before we go public with the names of the prospective winners. And therefore, because the board needs to do its approval before we go to the NTIA, the plan is to have the board's review done in executive session, just to avoid any inadvertent disclosure of the names or identities of the prospective winners. And then, of course, when we come out of executive session, the board would be announcing its result at that time. Now, I wanted to mention one of the things that the chair had asked for, I believe was during the February meeting, was that we have a resolution, a board resolution for these awards, and we can certainly do that. But in getting into preparing this document and looking at the information that would be provided to the board and comparing this process with the ARPA process, it didn't seem necessary. If there's going to be a substantive memorandum from staff making a recommendation of award, therefore the record should be clear enough when we come out of executive session to support the board's decision. But obviously that's up to the board how they want to proceed with that. But I'm saying at this point, I don't think a separate resolution would be necessary. It's certainly not what we did during the ARPA process. And is that now let's see, one more slide maybe. Any questions?
Yeah, I'll start. Thank you, Tony and Alexi. That's very helpful. Tony, regarding the resolution, the key thing was to make sure that we had not necessarily, we don't need you to repeat in a resolution the work you're providing in the memorandum, but the motion and action we put on the table, whatever words you want us to take action on, it would be great to have that in advance. Just the board approves, maybe the memorandum recommended by staff, whatever the date turns out to be, something just to be very succinct so to make sure we get the wording for our action appropriate, because this is a federal program and not, there's hoops that have to be jumped through accordingly, and we want to make sure we say the right words.
Understood. We will definitely have a motion there for the board.
Perfect. Thank you. I thought this was very helpful. This information is very helpful to describe our role. I appreciate this.
Great.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, excellent. All right. We can move to our next item on the agenda, which is item 7, parking lot. You're muted, Christine.
Yep, Ginny Reboyne will take this one. Go ahead, Ginny.
Okay.
Sorry, I was muted. Hi, everyone. Let's see. Okay. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
I always think you can't, and I don't know why. Anywho. So good afternoon. On today's agenda, we've already addressed parking lot items. Let's see, 123 regarding the board's role in the BEAD process, and 132, the long and underground drop program. Items on this slide and the next slide continue to be in progress. I would like to note that item number 40, the development of the recoupment. Why is that happening? The recoupment process. Or excuse me, the recruitment policy has become a priority, and staff is currently making the updates to that policy, and will reach out to Ms. Hoffman with the recommended changes. And then of course, we'll follow the policy approval process to complete that policy. So that will be coming up. Item, let's see, 124 is regarding the board's approval in the BEAD process, which we just spoke about. So I will update the parking lot to make sure that staff has a motion prepared for that.
Excellent.
At this time, all of the items on this slide and the next slide are continue to be in progress. They relate to the guidelines or restrictions for the $8 million in ARPA interest and ideas on what to do with these funds. Initially, the general counsel had begun creating a memo outlining the parameters and was instructed to hold off by Ms. Halquist, and Ms. Halquist can speak to any additional questions that you may have. The items on this slide were completed from our last board meeting. And that is it. So if you have any questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that summary. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, we can move right along. That brings us to VCUDA update, item 8, which is Rob Vitsky.
Great, thank you. Good morning, all. I guess it's afternoon. Good afternoon. Quick update today. It's a busy time as always, and I think the CDs are all kind of in their own areas of activity right now, but just a couple highlights for today. One is a very warm welcome to Patrick Moreland as the new executive director of DV Fiber and serving their 24 member towns. Patrick was most recently the deputy administrator in Brattleboro and has a lot of experience. I was recently told he was working on broadband in Dover years ago and has been involved in these issues for a long time. So we're really excited to have him on board at DV Fiber. He's going to be great. You all spoke about the drop program earlier. We enjoyed our collaboration with VCBP staff in the last couple of weeks and talking about how that will all come together, and look forward to the next steps in implementing that program. I'm sure there'll be comments as time goes on and as it comes along a little bit, but that's a great program and should really help get folks that have not been able to get connected before on the path to getting fiber broadband, which is great. VCUDA is tracking still several bills at the legislature, and I think, as you know, we've talked about the affordability bill and the consumer protection bill in the past. We're also tracking the open meetings law, which was passed last year, and there's some considerations of how to make that more efficient this year that we're watching very carefully as well. And then but not least, a number of the CUDs have been extremely busy the last couple of weeks, and on Wednesday at midnight, I think they all went to sleep and hopefully are waking up again and ready for the week this week. But it was a very busy time leading up to that Wednesday night deadline. So lots of activity. I think we'll kind of change direction now and start working on some new things in summer construction season now that those applications are in. And of course, we are eager for the process to stay on track and for the awards to be made and for as little disruption from whatever the feds are going to do on May 16th as possible, so that we can keep building broadband in Vermont. So unless there are any questions, that's the quick update for today.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob. Any questions or comments for Rob? Okay. Yeah, and I hope everybody is getting rest after they've hunkered down to put all that work into their proposals, or their applications, I should say. Thank you, everybody that worked on that. Okay, so that brings us to item 9 on our agenda, which is public comment. Christine, you want to run public comment?
Yes, anybody wants to make a comment, please raise your hand. You'll be given 3 minutes to speak and I'll recognize you in the order that you raise your hand. So feel free to take advantage of this moment. Well, I'm not seeing anything. This looks like it's going to be a very quick meeting.
Okay. No problems there. Okay, let's move on then to item 10 on our agenda, which is to confirm the next meeting. And as we said earlier, it will not be on May 12th, but instead will be on June 2nd. That way we can have time for the feedback, which is due from the federal government on May 16th on the BEAD program. And we'll take up that information on June 2nd. So our meeting will be June 2nd, noon to 4. And that is the end of the public session. Sarah, go
Good.
ahead.
Thanks, Patty. It was my idea to change that meeting, but is there any reason we also need the 12th as well, Christine, because other things will be piling up?
I don't see the need for that. I think we can get
Okay,
it all
great.
done in the June 2nd meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good clarifying
Brett.
question. Thank you for that. Okay, so that is
Patty,
the end of
just-
our public portion of the meeting. Dan?
We try to have occasional face-to-face meetings. Is that maybe one that we want to do face-to-face since the weather's getting better and travel is easy, or do you want to push that out till later in the season?
I support and recommend that. That's a good idea. Totally support that. Christine, do you have any concern about June 2nd?
Not at all. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, let's make that an in-person meeting. Good idea. Thanks, Dan. I know. Okay, that is the close of our public portion of the meeting. The board typically goes into executive session at the end of each meeting to address personnel items. I think we'll continue the protocol, and Christine will follow up with you after we are concluded.
Yep. So Ginny, can you move the board into executive session? And I'm not sure how Brian gets
Yeah,
there.
let me make the
was
motion
able-
and let me make the motion before we go there, so
Okay.
we can follow the
Oh,
appropriate
yeah, thank you.
protocol.
Sorry about that.
So I'm going to make a motion pursuant to 1 VSA section 313A33, authorizing a public body to hold an executive session to consider personnel matters. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Thank you, Sarah. Any discussion? How will we move Brian in?
I was able to assign him, excuse me,
Okay,
to the room, so
excellent.
he should go right over.
Excellent, very good. All right, all
Famous
those in
last words.
favor of moving into executive session, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed?
I am not opposed.
Okay. The ayes carry 5-0. We can now move into executive session.
Okay,
Thank you.
I've opened the room, so you should be moving over shortly.
Thank you all.
Nice job, Ginny.
Thank you. And Christine, just to confirm, this will end the meeting.
Yes, this ends the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Have a good day, everyone.